So I see people making mistakes all the time, and it's a part of the learning experience, but if I can help you avoid making those mistakes, then even better. So today I'm going to be going over things to avoid buying for your chameleon. So these are just going to be some of the common ones that I see people purchase. And the crazy thing is that a lot of these things that we're going to be talking about are actually marketed for chameleon owners, even though chameleon owners aren't intended to use them. And I think it's because once you see a panther chameleon, like, they're crazy cool looking, so how could a reptile company not just slap a picture of a panther chameleon on their product? But just because there's a picture of a chameleon on the product does not mean you should be using it for your chameleon. Also, just because the person at the pet store says that you should be using this product does not mean that you should be using this product for your chameleon. So please do your research. I'm gonna try and give you reasons why you should avoid purchasing these things, so hopefully you can better understand the recommendations that I'm making. The first one is going to be a compact UVB. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you know this is a very common chameleon owner mistake. So instead of buying the compact UVB, you actually want to purchase a T5 linear high output UVB. Reason being, the T5 UVB penetrates much deeper than the compact UVB. And like I said, I know there's a picture of a chameleon on it, but it's really the wrong UVB. And I have a whole video that goes into this in more detail, giving a greater explanation why, so check that out here. The next thing I'm going to suggest that you avoid buying entirely is the chameleon kit. And I know it's very tempting to want to buy it, but you're actually better off buying everything separately than what comes in the chameleon kit. Reason being is a lot of stuff that comes in the kit you don't even need, and a lot of stuff you actually do need, like you need, doesn't even come in the kit. So you're better off just buying everything separately than buying the chameleon kit. Without going into too much detail on that, because I know that's a hot topic in the chameleon community. Another thing to avoid buying entirely is Repticarpet, or any sort of grass carpet, anything that's fuzzy, and putting it at the bottom of your chameleon's enclosure. And I'm gonna put along with that any sort of Reptibark. You want no substrate, either a bare bottom, or alternatively go completely bioactive with isopods and all that good stuff, and like a super sick bioactive enclosure. But any sort of carpet or anything like that is going to be a host for bacteria because they poop on it and little particles get left behind. And with the bark, you run the risk of your chameleon accidentally ingesting it. Say a bug lands on a bark chip or whatever is at the bottom, and they eat that bug, then they eat the bark chip, and then they aren't able to pass it. They get impacted and potentially pass away. Not a good scenario, not a happy ending. So bare bottom or bioactive. Going off of that, the next thing you want to avoid buying are plastic plants. The reason being is exactly what I said, right? The impaction, ingesting it, and then not being able to pass it. Because chameleons, veiled specifically, will eat plants. And if it's a live plant, then they'll eat it, they'll swallow it, digest it, poop it out, live happily ever after. But if it's a plastic plant, then it's gonna get stuck, and odds are they're not gonna be able to pass it. I've actually seen chameleons pass away from eating plastic plants. Alternatively, what you could try is, like, you see this tree here? These are silk leaves. They're very flexible, they're very soft. They're still fake, but they're what are called silk leaves. And these are better than like the hard plastic ones. And so that's what I would use if you're going to use fake. But really, you should be using live plants. That's ideal. I just realized I actually have some of those plastic plants on hand, so I figured I'd show you guys the difference. So you can see these are like shiny plastic. Oop, that just broke up. Shiny plastic, and these are hard. They're not bendy, flexible, they're not soft, they're hard plastic. Did not buy these, I got them for free with an enclosure, versus this one, right, that we went over, that's like nice and smooth and soft. And while we're talking about plants, another common mistake is that people will buy the small plants for their chameleon enclosure, whether that's the fake ones or the real ones. People will buy small ones, but in actuality, you want to buy large plants, fake or live, to fill in the enclosure. Any empty space in a chameleon enclosure is unused space, and if your chameleon doesn't have proper hiding places or ways to get out of the heat or UVB, you're gonna run into some issues. So really, you should just invest in the larger fillings for your enclosure. Waterfalls are also something you want to avoid purchasing. I know they look super cool, and there's like that skull one that like every reptile shop seems to sell. That's like super cool looking. I think it even lights up, but waterfalls are not recommended for chameleons. Moving water is important, which is why we mist our chameleons and provide drippers. But the issue with the waterfalls is that they tend to grow bacteria. Imagine a piece of a dead bug gets in there, or your chameleon poops in the waterfall, or it just bacteria grows in there. Whatever the case may be, waterfalls are prone to growing bacteria, which then your chameleon's gonna be drinking from, and then most likely will get sick. And again, I've seen chameleons pass away from waterfalls. So I know it looks super cool, but like, is that worth the risk that you're potentially putting your chameleon on? Yeah. So I would avoid waterfalls. At the very least, like, you could put it in there and just not have any water in it, so it looks cool. Speaking of water, another thing you want to avoid buying is the big dripper. There's nothing wrong with the big dripper. It's totally functional. However, you can make one for nearly free. You can just get a milk gallon and rinse it out. I have mine at the top of my enclosure here. I have a whole video on how to make one yourself. Super cheap, just the cost of a plastic container, and you can make one yourself. So I'll link that up above here and in the description box below on how you can make your own and save yourself some money. Another very common thing I see people purchasing, especially if you're new to chameleon keeping and new to reptiles, are the Fluker's orange cubes. I think that's the name of them. But there's those orange cubes that you're supposed to feed to your crickets, and it's supposed to be their gut load. It's supposed to be awesome and everything else. But what would be a better alternative would be to use fresh gut load. Fresh fruits and vegetables that are recommended for chameleons versus the commercial like orange cubes. They just aren't nutritional for your chameleon. And speaking of food, another thing you want to avoid purchasing for your chameleon are dead bugs. Chameleons will only eat live bugs. They're attracted to movement, so those bugs that come in a can or bugs that are already dead, freeze-dried, avoid buying those. Not worth your money. Your chameleon's not going to eat them, so instead focus on purchasing live bugs. And while we're on the topic of bugs, this wasn't originally on my list, but I feel like I should mention it, is to avoid buying mealworms for your chameleon. They're not recommended because of their low nutritional value and that they can be difficult for your chameleon to digest. And there are plenty of other bugs that you can feed your chameleon instead. Hammocks are also something that I see a lot of new keepers purchasing. They're like reptile hammocks. I think they're intended for desert species like bearded dragons, but people will put them in their chameleon enclosures. If you think about a chameleon's natural habitat and natural movement, they're tree dwellers, right? They're arboreal creatures, so they're climbing branches and trees. They're not chilling in hammocks, you know, on the desert, slipping a pina colada. So I would scrap your hammock. It's not worth buying. Chameleons are not the intended species for it. Like, you're better off just buying some nice quality sticks or live plants. This next one I see most commonly being used at night, and that's red heat bulbs. For one, chameleons don't usually need heat at night unless it gets below 65 degrees Fahrenheit. But more importantly is the red light can actually be harmful for chameleon's eyes. So instead, I would recommend that you use a white bulb. A bulb that puts out white light instead of red light. So next I want to talk about vines, and I know it's very tempting to want to put in like those mossy, cool looking vines and makes it look like a rainforest, but the issue with the mossy vines is, one, your chameleon can ingest the moss, right? We again are running the risk of impaction. Is that worth the risk? I don't think so, personally. And also the moss on the vines can hold on to moisture and thus grow bacteria. Also, the Fluker's Benda vines have that same issue. They're like the brown styrofoam ones. Those can grow bacteria. The foam, like the styrofoam, will start flaking off. Your chameleon could potentially eat that. So I would avoid trying to use like the bendy vines and instead just stick to natural branches, plants, you know, things that you would find in the wild. A very common mistake is to buy the dual dome fixtures, and this goes along with the chameleon kit and the compact UVB. It's the fixture that has one spot for heat and one spot for UVB. You're better off just buying a single dome for heat, and then what you actually want is that long linear bulb that we talked about earlier, right? The T5 high output linear UVB. So buying the dual dome is kind of a moot point unless you're intending in putting a plant grow like LED bulb, because then you have one for heat, one as a plant bulb, and then have your T5. But if you're just wanting heat and UVB, which is totally fine to just have those two, then you're better off just buying the single dome. And the last one that I want to touch on to avoid buying is any Reptile branded accessories or devices. This is going to include things like outlet timers, humidity gauges, temperature gauges, feeding tongs, misting bottles, even heat bulbs, all that. Anything that has a Reptile brand name on it, you're just paying more for it. You really are, you're just paying more for it. Alternatively, what you could buy is you could go to Walmart or Target and buy an outlet timer for, I think I got mine for like $3. You go to the dollar store and get a hand pump mister, or like spray bottle, or you could go to the garden center and get the pumpy, you know, the mister one. For a heat bulb, instead of getting the like Reptile branded heat bulb, get a heat bulb that's the correct wattage. Point being is just avoid buying Reptile brands. Like the quality is the exact same, like you're just paying for the name in all honesty. So you're better off buying, you know, non-Reptile brand accessories. Hopefully this video gives you a better understanding of things to avoid purchasing as well as some better alternatives. Let me know down in the comments maybe some things that you've purchased and you realized, uh-oh, I shouldn't have gotten this. Maybe you can help out some other keepers. Also, please check out the search function of my YouTube channel and peruse for different videos. Most of the time you guys will comment, do you have a video about blah? Insert video topic here. And most of the time I do have a video about that topic, so please check out my channel, continue doing your research. I will always link down in the description box below other videos that I think are related to the video that I'm talking about now. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Leave any questions or comments down below, and feel free to follow Neptune and all my chameleons on Instagram at Neptune the Chameleon. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day. Bye! Companies would or you've had your talking is so hard. Alternatives, let me know